At 6:42 on a cold Tuesday morning, I was standing in a grocery store parking lot in full U.S. Army uniform when a police officer told me to step away from my own car like I was about to commit a crime. He didn't yell, didn't curse, didn't act like this was dramatic. He just said it calm and flat like he'd said it 100 times before. And that calm tone is what stayed with me because when something humiliating feels routine to someone else, you realize it probably is. Sir, step away from the vehicle. Hands where I can see them. That's how it started. No greeting, no explanation, just authority. I turned slowly. I've learned over the years that slow movements keep everybody comfortable. I'm 6'3", broad shoulders, dark skin uniform pressed so sharp the creases could cut paper. Silver eagle on my chest, full colonel. 26 years in the Army stitched into that jacket. "Is there a problem, officer?" I asked, steady voice respectful. "We got a call about a suspicious individual matching your description. I need ID. Suspicious." I remember glancing down at myself for half a second, almost wondering if I missed something. Dress uniform. Government tags. It wasn't even 7 a.m. Suspicious of what exactly? Buying coffee too early. Still, I nodded. I reached into my pocket slowly. Slow enough to show I wasn't a threat, deliberate enough to show I wasn't nervous. I handed him my military ID, active duty, heading to base. He looked at it like it was a coupon someone printed at home. Uniform could be fake. People impersonate military all the time. Yeah, that happened. There's a moment when someone decides not to believe you, and it doesn't come with fireworks. It's quiet. It's subtle. But you feel the weight shift. "Turn around for me," he said. "Am I being detained?" "Yes." "For what?" "Investigation." That word, investigation, hung in the air like it meant something concrete. It didn't, but the cuffs did. Cold steel snapped around my wrists. Tight, efficient, final. "Sir, this is unnecessary," I said calmly. Not defiant, not angry, just stating a fact. He tightened them anyway. "I've stood in combat zones where decisions cost lives. I've written letters to parents explaining why their sons weren't coming home. I've commanded thousands of soldiers. And there I was, hands behind my back in a grocery store parking lot because someone thought I didn't look like what a colonel was supposed to look like. You know what I mean?" A woman loading groceries paused. A teenager lifted his phone. Someone whispered, "That's a colonel." The officer heard it. He didn't react. Inside the patrol car, the plastic seat was stiff, smelled faintly of disinfectant and sweat. I stared at my reflection in the plexiglass divider. Uniform still perfect, ribbons aligned, cuffs biting into skin. I kept thinking about how I've corrected young lieutenants for the smallest uniform detail. Attention matters, presentation matters, discipline matters. Turns out sometimes it doesn't. At the station it was routine at first. Officers glanced up, saw a black man in cuffs, went back to their screens. No shock there. What changed the room was the computer. The desk sergeant scanned my ID. The system flagged my rank. He leaned closer to the screen, blinked, looked at me again. "Who brought him in?" The officer raised his hand. Silence followed. Not loud, just heavy. Conversations died mid-sentence. Papers shuffled for no reason. That kind of silence only happens when authority realizes it might have misfired. Outside, that 30-second clip was already spreading. By the time they removed the cuffs, it had captions. By mid-morning, it had headlines. By evening, it had analysts. But the humiliation happened long before the hashtags. It happened in the moment my credibility didn't count. A captain stepped out of his office and nodded at me. "Colonel, we're verifying some information." "Take your time," I said. "I've learned patience over decades. Patience under fire, patience under scrutiny, patience when I had to be twice as prepared just to be considered equal." Eventually, the apology came. "We regret the inconvenience." Inconvenience. That word landed like a shrug. Like what happened was a scheduling mix-up instead of a public detention without cause. When they finally uncuffed me and walked me out, a few people were still filming. Someone said, "Thank you for your service. I didn't turn around." Gratitude in that moment felt complicated. Here's the thing, people ask me all the time, why didn't you argue? Why didn't you push back harder? Because I've seen what happens when calm slips. Because I've trained my entire life to control what I can control. Because debates on asphalt don't end well. Documentation does. Within 48 hours, attorneys were involved. Federal complaint filed. Unlawful detention, Fourth Amendment violation, failure to verify identification, racial profiling. The paperwork didn't shout. It didn't need to. It laid out the facts, clean and clinical. No articulable suspicion. Verified ID ignored. Detention prolonged after confirmation. The footage backed it up. No resistance, no threat, no raised voice, just compliance. Internal Affairs reopened his file. Complaints that once looked minor started to look like patterns when someone connected them. Disproportionate stops. escalations after explanations were offered, a habit of trusting instinct over verification. 3 months later, he was terminated. Conduct unbecoming, loss of public trust. The city settled before trial. The amount wasn't public, but it was enough to make people uncomfortable in budget meetings. And here's where the story shifts. I didn't keep most of it. I directed funds toward veterans' legal aid, civil rights education, and accountability training. Because if this ended with a check and nothing else changed, what was the point? When I finally agreed to speak publicly, a reporter asked me, "Do you think this was about you personally?" I told her it wasn't about me. It was about what happens when assumptions get authority. That's the twist in this whole thing. It would have been easier if this was just one bad officer making one bad call. But the real issue is quieter. It's what happens when suspicion doesn't require proof. When someone sees you as an anomaly before they see you as legitimate. I did everything right. I complied, I spoke clearly, I presented identification, I didn't escalate, and for several long minutes, none of that mattered. Imagine if I didn't have rank. Imagine if there weren't cameras. Imagine if I'd raised my voice even slightly. What would that headline have looked like? That's the part that stays with me. Legally, it's simple. Reasonable suspicion requires specific facts. Not a hunch, not discomfort, not he didn't look right. Once my credentials were verified, the detention should have ended immediately. Every additional minute compounded the violation. That's constitutional law, not opinion. Socially, though, it's more layered. Bias doesn't wear a label. It hides behind words like proactive and cautious. It reinforces itself quietly. And when you combine that with authority, the consequences multiply. I went back to work the next day. Same uniform, same posture. Briefing at 900. Because leadership isn't about avoiding embarrassment. It's about modeling composure. My soldiers didn't need to see me shaken. They needed to see me steady. But I won't pretend it didn't sting. There's a particular exhaustion that comes from realizing excellence doesn't always shield you, that you can check every box and still be asked to prove you belong again. Some people said it was just a mistake. Others said this proves the system is broken. The truth is more uncomfortable than either extreme. One officer made a decision rooted in suspicion he couldn't articulate. A system initially backed that decision. Evidence forced it to reconsider. Accountability followed because the facts were undeniable. But accountability after exposure isn't the same as prevention. Departments announced reforms, mandatory verification procedures, bias training, early warning systems for repeat complaints. Necessary steps, sure, but policy on paper and culture in practice aren't always aligned. You know what I mean? Justice in my case was visible, and visibility matters. But many people never get that. They don't have rank, they don't have leverage, they don't have viral footage forcing review. So I think back to that parking lot sometimes. The cold air, the click of cuffs, the calm tone in the officer's voice. Two men standing on opposite sides of authority, both believing they were justified. Only one of us had to prove it. If you've ever been underestimated, dismissed, or judged before you spoke, you probably recognize that feeling. Maybe not the uniform, maybe not the patrol car, but that moment when your credibility gets questioned simply because someone decided it didn't fit their expectations. So let me ask you something. Was this just caution taken too far, or was it something deeper? Have you ever witnessed a situation where assumption outran facts? Do you believe accountability like this is enough to change behavior, or does it just address the surface? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Share your experiences. Push back if you disagree. Because stories like this don't end when the cuffs come off. They end when we decide what standards we expect from people who hold authority, and what we're willing to accept when those standards fall short.